Melissa, you sure about this guy? My best friend, Sarah, always had a way of cutting straight to the chase. Jack's different, I said as I packed up the last of my apartment into cardboard boxes. He's kind, genuine, and he loves me for me, not just some idea of me. Meeting Jack was like breathing fresh air. He was a software developer with a goofy smile that could light up any room. When we met at a mutual friend's party, he spent the evening making me laugh and listening to my stories about long night shifts at the hospital. It didn't take long for us to click. Jack's mom is a bit of a tough cookie, though, I continued, deciding to lay it all out for Sarah. I hadn't told her much about Mrs. Cole. The first time I met her, she looked me over like I was a car she was about to buy, very skeptical. She made a comment about my job, said something like, "Nursing is such a cute little career, isn't it? Like I'm playing dress up or something." Sarah snorted. Well, just watch yourself around her. These mother-in-laws can be tricky. Jack and I had dated for 2 years before he popped the question. He did it in such a simple yet perfect way, during a picnic in the park where we had our first date. It wasn't fancy, but it was us. I said yes without hesitation. The wedding was small but lovely, filled with close friends and family, except Mrs. Cole, who spent most of the time critiquing the floral arrangements and whispering to relatives. I tried to brush it off. I was marrying Jack, not his mom, I reminded myself. Jack suggested buying a house in the suburbs, I continued. It's beautiful, but the mortgage would mean tightening our belts for a while. Damn, straight into the deep end, huh? How do you feel about that? I hesitated, my hands fiddling with the tape dispenser. I'm not sure. It's a big commitment, and with my shifts, it's not like I have a lot of spare cash floating around. Make sure it's what you both want, Mel. It's not just his life, it's yours too. I knew she was right. The idea of moving to a quieter place was appealing, especially considering the chaos of hospital life. But the financial strain was intimidating. Still, Jack was persuasive, saying things like, "We'll make it work, Mel. We always do." And his optimism was infectious. "We'll see," I said finally. "Let's get these boxes down to the truck." It had been a few months since Jack and I moved into our new house. I was still adjusting to the rhythm of paying the hefty mortgage every month, while Jack took care of our other expenses. Life was settling into a new kind of normal until the day Jack came back from visiting his mom, and everything turned upside down. Jack walked through the door, not alone but with his mother, Mrs. Cole, who had a grim look and a suitcase that looked like it housed her entire life. "Mel, Mom's going to stay with us for a bit. She's not feeling great," Jack said, as if it was a small, trivial change to our daily lives. I stood there, mouth slightly open, a frown forming. "Jack, when were you going to discuss this with me?" My voice was calm, but the annoyance was hard to mask. "Look, I know this is sudden, but she's really ill," Jack replied, his eyes pleading for understanding. Mrs. Cole, setting her suitcase down with a heavy thud, chimed in. "Those doctors don't know anything. They just want to steal the little pension I have left. I'm going to follow a special treatment plan my friend suggested. She just got back from some island and swears by it." I sighed, pinching the bridge of my nose. "Jack, we should have talked about this. We could arrange for a nurse or find a good facility." Jack's expression hardened. "Mel, I owe her. She's my mom. We're not sending her anywhere." Mrs. Cole walked over and hugged Jack tightly, giving me a look over his shoulder that could chill coffee. "Thank you, son. At least someone cares about me." As she released Jack and began surveying the room, her criticism started. "All this furniture is all wrong. It's blocking the energy flow. And, Melissa, really, this place is a mess," she declared, her voice filled with a mix of disdain and condescension. Jack rushed to her side, nodding and muttering agreements. I clenched my fists, feeling my space and my opinions shrinking by the second. Over the next few days, my home turned into Mrs. Cole's personal project. Every morning started with her critiques. "Melissa, these curtains are all wrong. They block the sunlight and positive vibes. And why is there so much clutter here? Jack was no help. Every time I tried to discuss a boundary or compromise, he stood by his mother. Mel, she's just trying to help. Let's just do things her way for a while. One evening, I reached my breaking point. Jack, we need to talk. Now, I said firmly as I pulled him aside. Your mother is taking over our home, and you keep siding with her. You're my husband. I thought we were supposed to be a team. Jack sighed, running his hands through his hair. I know it's tough, but she's family. We have to look after her. She's old and alone. I get that she's your mom, but where do I fit into this? Am I just supposed to nod and smile and let her redo our entire house? When do my feelings get considered? My voice cracked a bit at the end. Jack looked torn, his face a mix of frustration and guilt. I'm sorry, Mel. I didn't realize it was this bad for you. Let's sit down with Mom tomorrow and set some ground rules. The next day never came for that talk. Mrs. Cole had bigger plans, and Jack, as always, was swept up in her current. I retreated, feeling more like a guest in my own home with each passing day. The tension in our house was ramping up each day, and I was caught in a relentless cycle of exhaustion. Balancing night shifts at the hospital with the increasing demands at home was wearing me down. One afternoon, after a particularly grueling night shift, I collapsed into bed, hoping for a few precious hours of sleep. But peace was a luxury I couldn't afford, not with Mrs. Cole around. Barely an hour into my sleep, her voice, shrill and piercing, jolted me awake. Melissa, how can you sleep at a time like this? I'm ill, and there's nothing to eat. You need to take care of me, she bellowed from the kitchen. I dragged myself out of bed, my body heavy with fatigue, and stumbled into the kitchen. Mrs. Cole, I just came off a night shift. I really need to sleep. Can it wait a bit? She was rummaging through the cabinets, clattering pots and pans. No, it cannot wait. I need proper nutrition. Look at this, there's nothing here I can eat. I leaned against the door frame, barely keeping my eyes open. What exactly do you need? I'll make something quick. This. She thrust a crumpled magazine page at me. I need a meal with these ingredients. They're essential for my condition. With a heavy heart, I started pulling out whatever was closest to the list, trying to cobble together a meal that would appease her. It was slapdash, but it would have to do. After eating, she wasn't done with her demands. Now, come rearrange my room. The bed needs to be on the other side, and hang the mirror on the north wall. It's good for prosperity. That evening, when Jack came home, I was at my breaking point. Jack, we need to talk. Your mom, she's not as sick as she says. I asked her to get checked at the hospital, to get a proper diagnosis, but she refuses. She doesn't trust hospitals. She's doing what she believes in. Why can't you support that? Because it's not practical. I'm a nurse, Jack. I know what care looks like, and this isn't it. She's capable of taking care of herself. She's manipulating us. Jack shook his head, disappointment etched across his face. I can't believe you, Melissa. You're supposed to be compassionate. How can you be so heartless? Feeling defeated, I walked away from the conversation, my mind a whirl of frustration and sadness. This wasn't the life I'd signed up for. I loved Jack, but living with his mother under these conditions was turning our home into a battleground, and I was losing. A month rolled by, and miraculously, Mrs. Cole was prancing around the house like a spring chicken, the picture of health. Her miraculous recovery had me doubting the severity of her illness in the first place. It was high time we discussed her moving back to her place. One evening, as we were clearing the dishes, I broached the topic. Mrs. Cole, you seem much better now. Have you thought about when you might go back to your apartment? She didn't even blink, washing a plate with a slow, deliberate motion. Oh, I've taken care of that. I canceled the lease. I'm staying here permanently. I nearly dropped the dish I was holding. Permanently? Yes, dear. It's for the best. I'm here with family. The news hit me like a ton of bricks. This wasn't part of the plan. I found Jack in the living room, deep into some game on his phone. Jack, we need to talk. Your mom just told me she's canceled her lease. She plans to stay here permanently. Jack looked up, his expression neutral. Yeah, I thought she might. It's better this way, she's family. But we didn't discuss this. Jack, we can't afford another person in the house. And honestly, her being here it's a lot for me to handle. Jack sighed, putting down his phone. Melissa, it's only been a month. You haven't really given it a chance. We can make this work. We're a family. Feeling cornered, I threw myself into work, picking up extra shifts to manage the mortgage and the growing expenses. Meanwhile, Jack's contribution remained the same, but the burden didn't feel evenly distributed anymore. Back at home, mealtimes turned into another battleground. Mrs. Cole insisted on a specific diet, lean, bland, utterly tasteless stuff that sapped the joy out of cooking and eating. One night, as I served dinner, Jack made a face. What's this? It tastes like cardboard. It's what your mother requires, I replied, my patience wearing thin. Well, can you cook something different for me then? Something with a bit of flavor? I clenched my jaw, holding back a sharp retort. Jack, I'm not running a restaurant here. I'm working day and night. If you want something different, maybe help out? Jack pushed his plate away, his mood darkening. Forget it. I'll order something. The financial strain was becoming unbearable. Mrs. Cole, noticing the tension, finally spoke up one evening. Melissa, I see you're stressed about money. I'll give you some each week to help out. True to her word, she started handing me $100 to $200 every week. It wasn't much, but it helped ease the pressure slightly. Yet, the core issue remained unaddressed. It started with little things, missing earrings, a bracelet here, a necklace there. I'd put them down, and then poof, gone. I thought I was just being forgetful, until more items began disappearing. First, it was my gold jewelry, and then household items like a vase and some small decorative statuettes. It didn't add up. I wasn't misplacing these things, they were being taken. One evening, I finally voiced my suspicions to Jack. I think your mom might be taking my things. My jewelry's gone, and now other items are missing too. Jack's reaction was instant and intense. I can't believe you'd think so low of my mom. She's not a thief. With no way to secure my belongings at home, I started taking my remaining jewelry to work. It was ridiculous, carrying around valuables, because I couldn't trust the security of my own home. But what else could I do? Then one day, I came home early from my shift, the sun still high in the sky. What I saw in front of our house stopped me dead in my tracks. Mrs. Cole had set up a makeshift table on the sidewalk, covered with what looked like a garage sale setup. But it wasn't just random knickknacks, it was my stuff, my cosmetics, some clothes, and even personal items, all laid out for anyone to buy. Mrs. Cole, what is this? I approached, my voice shaking with anger. Oh, Melissa. I'm just helping out. You said we needed money, so I'm making some, she replied cheerily, as if she was doing me a favor. This is my stuff. You can't just sell my things. I exclaimed, grabbing a sweater off the table. Look, I'm just trying to help. You keep saying money's tight, so I thought I'd clear out some clutter and make a few bucks, she explained, as if it were the most logical thing in the world. I was seething, so that's where her money comes from, which she shared so generously with us. Without another word, I started packing up everything. My hands trembled with rage as I stuffed my belongings into bags. I called Jack immediately, my words tumbling out. Jack, your mom is selling my things on the street. You need to come home now. He was silent for a moment when he arrived and saw the scene. His mother, caught in the act, tried to explain, but I was too furious to listen. Melissa, she was just trying to help, Jack said finally, siding with her yet again. Help? By selling my personal items? I couldn't hide my disbelief. This isn't helping, Jack. This is crossing a line. I couldn't take it anymore. The next day, I hired a locksmith to install a new lock on our bedroom door. I moved all my valuables and anything I cared about into our room and turned it into my personal fortress. At least in there, my world remained untouched. Jack was cold about it, saying I was overreacting. You're locking away from your family, Melissa. That's what you're doing. Family doesn't steal from each other, Jack, I retorted, my voice icy. He didn't have much to say after that. The house felt more divided than ever, my little locked room versus the rest of the space, which seemed increasingly dominated by Mrs. Cole's whims. For a brief spell, life seemed to return to a semblance of normalcy. Mrs. Cole kept to herself, and my belongings remained untouched. I began to relax a little, hoping that maybe, just maybe, we had reached an understanding. But that peace was short-lived. One afternoon, I came home earlier than usual. The house was quiet, too quiet. Instinctively, I felt something was off. I dropped my bag and headed straight for my room, the sanctuary I had locked away from the world. The door, which I always kept locked, was ajar. My heart sank. I pushed the door open and there she was, Mrs. Cole, rummaging through my dresser, her hands full of my jewelry. The sight of her ignited a fury in me I had never felt before. Mrs. Cole, what on earth do you think you're doing? My voice was sharp, laced with anger. She jolted, clearly not expecting me. Her face morphed quickly from shock to defiance. I stormed out to the living room and yelled for Jack, who was in the kitchen. He came running, a look of concern on his face that quickly turned to irritation when he saw the scene. Jack, look at your mother. She's stealing from me. I pointed towards Mrs. Cole, who followed meekly, clutching my jewelry to her chest. Jack looked from me to his mother, his expression darkening. Melissa, why must you always assume the worst? She's my mother. Your mother who's standing right here with my jewelry in her hands. I couldn't believe he was still trying to defend her. He turned on me, his voice rising. You know what, I'm tired of this, Melissa. Tired of your constant complaining, your accusations, your distrust. His mother stood by, nodding along to every word he said, a smug look on her face. You don't cook properly anymore, you hide things, you separate yourself from us. What kind of family is that? Jack continued, his words slicing through any remaining bond we had. I looked at him, really looked at him, and I saw a stranger. This wasn't the man I married. This was someone else, someone who would choose his thieving mother over his wife. I want a divorce, Jack, I said quietly, the words tasting bitter but necessary. His response was immediate and cold. Fine. The next few weeks were a blur of lawyers, papers, and cold, silent meals. We agreed to sell the house and split the proceeds. I didn't argue, I just wanted out. I found a small apartment and moved my most precious belongings there, leaving behind a life I could no longer bear. Driving away, I didn't look back. I had new beginnings to chase, and this time I would make sure they were filled with trust and respect, something I hadn't felt in a long time. Jack and his mother could have each other, and I would finally have myself. I came back to the house to pick up the last of my things, expecting it to be quiet. Instead, I was met with fury. As soon as I stepped through the door, Jack was on me like a storm. There you are, you vile woman. Where is my car? His face was red, his voice loud enough to shake the windows. What are you talking about, Jack? I didn't take your car, I said, genuinely confused and taken aback by his aggression. Don't play dumb with me, Melissa. My car's gone, and you took it because you want revenge. He stepped closer, his eyes wild. His mother, sitting in a chair with a blanket around her shoulders, chimed in, her voice dripping with venom. She's always been awful, Jack. I told you she was no good. I was speechless. The situation was spiraling, and I had no idea how to calm it down. Before I could gather my thoughts to respond, Jack's phone rang. He snatched it up, still glaring at me. His face changed from anger to confusion as he listened. What? An accident? My car? He paused, looking between his phone and his mother. Who was driving it? His mother's face went pale. I watched as the truth came crashing down. The room went silent except for the voice on the other end of the phone line, which I couldn't hear. Jack ended the call and turned to his mother, his voice shaky with restrained rage. Mom, tell me you didn't take my car. His mother started to sob, her hands covering her face. I just wanted to go for a ride. I didn't mean any harm. You weren't supposed to drive it. You're not on the insurance. Do you understand what this means? Jack's voice rose with each word. I stood there, watching the drama unfold, the pieces falling into place. Jack's anger boiled over. Get out. I can't even look at you right now. You're going to pay for this, every last cent. His mother tried to plead with him, but he wasn't having it. He grabbed her things and shoved them at her, pushing her towards the door. Go. I'll be contacting a lawyer about this. She was crying, a pitiful, wailing sound that might have once made me feel sorry for her. Not today. Today, it was just noise. As the door slammed behind her, Jack turned to me, suddenly softening. Melissa, I didn't know. I'm sorry. Can we start over? Maybe we can. I cut him off, my own voice calm but firm. Jack, you never stood up for me. Not once. How could I ever trust you to protect me or us? I can't be with someone who doesn't see me, who doesn't believe in me. After the divorce was finalized, and the house sold, splitting the money felt like the last cord tying me to a life that was no longer mine. I found a cozy apartment in a friendly neighborhood. The first time I made the mortgage payment, I was relieved. It was nothing like the suffocating debt of our old home. This was manageable, something that didn't keep me up at night. The place was small, but every corner of it was filled with possibilities. Decorating it became my new project, a way to reclaim my space and my identity. One lazy Sunday afternoon, as I was arranging some books on a new shelf, my phone rang. It was my best friend, Sarah. Hey, Melissa. How's the new apartment treating you? Sarah's voice was always bubbly, even through the phone. It's great, Sarah. Finally feels like I'm breathing again, I said, smiling as I looked around my little living room. I heard about the lawsuit. Jack really went through with it against his mom, huh? Her tone was a mix of disbelief and curiosity. I chuckled, not without a hint of irony. Oh, he did. And he won. His mom has to pay for all the repairs to the car. Last I heard, she had to pick up a job because of it. No way. She's working? After all those years of acting like the queen bee? Sarah's surprise was palpable. Yep, reality hit her hard. They'd been at each other's throats since the court decision. It's a mess, but honestly, Sarah, they dug that hole for themselves, I said, not able to keep the satisfaction out of my voice. After hanging up, I thought about how much had changed. Jack and his mother were a constant source of drama, and now, distanced from it, my life was mine again, quiet, peaceful, mine. Over the next few months, I threw myself into decorating my new apartment and taking up hobbies I neglected. My evenings were no longer about navigating family dramas, but about rediscovering what made me happy, reading, painting, and sometimes, just watching old movies. One evening, while I was painting a canvas with broad, vibrant strokes, my phone rang. It was Jack. Melissa, hi. Just wanted to check in. How are you? His voice was tentative, unsure. I'm good, Jack. Really good, actually. Just working on a painting right now. I responded, my tone polite but distant. That sounds great. I'm glad you're doing well. He paused, and I could almost hear him struggling to find the right words. Listen, I've been doing some thinking. I cut him off before he could continue. Jack, I hope you find whatever it is you're looking for. But for me, I've already found it, my peace. I need to focus on that. Hanging up, I looked around my little apartment, my sanctuary, filled with things that brought me joy. The phone call hadn't stirred the old chaos, it had only affirmed my new path.